Welcome to a chilling descent into true night shift horror stories, where the routine turns terrifying and the darkness holds more than just exhaustion. For many, the night shift is just another part of the job, a quiet, lonely stretch of time. But for some, those hours become something far more sinister. Unexplained sounds, shifting shadows, and eerie encounters turn ordinary workplaces into haunted battlegrounds of the unknown. In this video, we'll uncover real-life encounters from night shift workers who have faced the unthinkable, experiences that linger long after the sun rises. So grab your headphones, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unsettling world of night shift horror stories. But be warned, you may never see the night the same way again. In the heart of the city, there stood an old hospital, its walls steeped in history and whispers of the past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the once bustling corridors transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and silence. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting an unsettling glow that only heightened the eerie atmosphere. For the night shift workers, this was not just a place of healing. It was a realm where the living and the dead seemed to coexist, and where every creak of the floorboards echoed like a ghostly reminder of those who had come before. Meet Sarah, a dedicated nurse who had been working the night shift for over 3 years. She was no stranger to the peculiarities of the hospital at night, but nothing could prepare her for the chilling encounter that awaited her one fateful evening. As she made her rounds, the stillness of the night wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, amplifying every sound. The distant beeping of machines and the soft rustle of sheets were the only signs of life, but even those felt like whispers in a graveyard. It was during her shift in the pediatric ward that Sarah first noticed something unusual. As she entered a dimly lit room to check on a sleeping child, she felt a sudden chill in the air. The temperature dropped, and an inexplicable sense of dread washed over her. She brushed it off as fatigue, but as she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the foot of the bed. It was a woman, dressed in a flowing white gown, her face obscured by long, dark hair. Sarah's heart raced as she blinked, and in an instant, the figure vanished, leaving only the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. The psychological impact of that encounter weighed heavily on Sarah. Working alone in such a setting, where the line between reality and the supernatural blurred, began to take its toll. Each night, she found herself glancing over her shoulder, haunted by the memory of the ghostly figure. The once comforting routine of her job became a source of anxiety as she questioned her own sanity. Was she truly alone in the hospital, or was something watching her from the shadows? As the nights wore on, Sarah's resolve began to wane. The haunting presence lingered in her mind, a constant reminder that in the stillness of the night, the past could reach out and touch the living in ways they could never fully understand. In the outskirts of town, an old warehouse loomed like a forgotten giant, its windows shattered and walls covered in layers of grime. Once a bustling hub of activity, it now stood desolate, a shell of its former self. The night shift workers who were assigned to monitor the property often found themselves engulfed in an atmosphere thick with unease. The air was heavy with the scent of rust and decay, and the only sounds were the distant howling of the wind and the unsettling creaks of the building settling into its own demise. Enter Mark, a security guard tasked with patrolling the abandoned warehouse during the graveyard shift. He had heard the stories about the place, rumors of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings, but he brushed them off as mere urban legends. However, as he stepped inside that night, the oppressive darkness wrapped around him like a shroud, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. As Mark made his rounds, the silence was punctuated by unsettling noises that echoed through the cavernous space. The sound of dripping water reverberated off the walls, and every now and then, he could hear what sounded like faint whispers, as if the very walls were trying to communicate with him. He paused, straining to listen, but the whispers faded into the shadows, leaving him with an unsettling sense of dread. It wasn't long before Mark's unease turned into outright terror. As he walked past a row of rusted machinery, he caught sight of something moving in the corner of his eye. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting and contorting in ways that defied logic. He turned quickly, but there was nothing there, just the oppressive darkness and the echo of his own heartbeat. Yet the feeling of being followed lingered, gnawing at his sanity. The isolation of the warehouse amplified his fear. With no one else around, every creak and groan of the building felt like a warning. Mark's mind raced as he imagined what could be lurking in the shadows. Was it just his imagination, or was there something truly sinister hiding in the depths of the warehouse? The unknown became a palpable entity, feeding on his anxiety and heightening his senses. As the hours dragged on, Mark's resolve began to crumble. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to close in around him. He realized that in this desolate place, he was not just guarding against intruders, he was battling his own fear of the unknown, trapped in a nightmare where the line between reality and the supernatural blurred. The abandoned warehouse had become a prison of his own making, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. In the dead of night, a small gas station stood alone on a desolate stretch of highway, its neon lights flickering like a beacon in the darkness. The world outside was shrouded in silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant sound of a passing car. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with an eerie quietness that seemed to seep into every corner of the station. For the night shift attendant, Jake, this was a familiar yet unsettling routine, where the mundane could quickly turn into the bizarre. As Jake settled in for his shift, he poured himself a cup of coffee, the only comfort in the stillness. The clock ticked slowly, each second stretching into eternity. He often found himself lost in thought, staring out at the empty parking lot, waiting for the next customer to break the monotony. But on this particular night, the stillness was punctuated by an unsettling feeling, as if the air itself was charged with anticipation. Around midnight, the tranquility was shattered when a car pulled into the lot. The headlights illuminated the gas station, casting long shadows that danced across the pavement. A figure emerged from the vehicle, a man dressed in a long, dark coat that seemed out of place in the warm night air. As he approached the counter, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. There was something off about this customer, an aura of unease that hung around him like a fog. The man stepped inside, his movements deliberate and slow. He approached the counter, and Jake forced a smile, trying to mask his discomfort. "How can I help you?" he asked, his voice slightly trembling. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at Jake with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if the stranger could see right through him. After what felt like an eternity, the man finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "I need to fill up my tank," he said, gesturing toward the door. As Jake turned to activate the pump, he noticed something strange. The lights flickered again, and the temperature in the station seemed to drop. He glanced back at the man, who was now standing unnaturally still, his eyes fixed on a spot just behind Jake. Suddenly, the gas station's radio crackled to life, playing a distorted version of a song that sent shivers down Jake's spine. The strange customer's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it, only a chilling sense of foreboding. Jake's heart raced as he felt the tension in the air thicken, the mundane setting transforming into a scene straight out of a horror film. As the man filled his tank, bizarre occurrences began to unfold. The lights flickered more violently, and the shelves seemed to shift slightly, as if the station itself was alive. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but he was rooted to the spot, caught in a web of fear and confusion. In that moment, he realized that even in the most ordinary places, darkness could seep in, turning a simple night shift into a terrifying encounter with the unknown.